Laura Gibbs. Welcome back to Teaching in Higher Ed. We're doing an extended version of the episode with Laura, episode 570. And this is the video version where Laura is going to tell us a little bit more about Twine, about how we can create these kinds of stories. And we're going to actually get to take a peek at things. So, Laura, I'm going to pass it over to you as my teacher, and you tell me where to go.
Well, I thought we could begin at the beginning because you're looking at a website that I have that has all my Twine games that I created in my classes together with my students who also created Twine games. And the very first one I ever wrote is called Mouse Bride, which is over there on the top right corner with that navigation. You see where it says Mouse Bride?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we play Mouse Bride? This is based on an ancient Indian folktale that's well known all over throughout Asia and is actually known in Europe and the Middle East too. But it's a very cute little story, and it's a very basic kind of choose your adventure type of Twine game.
And I'm noticing for people, we went from a website where you have all of these curated together, and now we appear to be on a Google Sites page, which would seem to indicate the last I checked, Google Sites is something that is a free thing that so somebody could come up here and.
Oh, and let me tell you, Google Sites is great for Twine because Twine gives you a chunk of HTML, but it doesn't have any sidebars or navigation or a chance to explain what's going on. So Google Sites is the easiest way I know of to have a web page where you can stick your Twine game in there and then give the instructions or the rules or the background or whatever. And so that's what I've done here. So this is a Google site that has just one Twine game in it. The site where we started has 5 or 6, I think. Twine is not a website builder. It's a game builder, and you need a place to put your Twine game when you're done. So putting them inside a Google site is super easy. Just embed the HTML content.
All right. Are we going to do this one?
Yes. So do you want to read? Should I read? Should we take turns reading? We can go back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start because you just arrived, right? You have been born as a mouse, a tiny girl mouse. Your mouse mother takes good care of you. You're growing up, getting bigger and bigger every day. Now it is time for you to go outside on your own. You scurry through the grass. Time goes by. Oh no, you're lost. You scurry left, and you have no choice but to click on that. So this is how Twine can just break the reading up into chunks. And you scurry right. You go around and around, but you cannot find your way home. And then, just when you are about to give up hope, now why don't you read, Bonnie?
A kindly woman finds you. She has no children of her own, so she decides to take you home. The woman and her husband adopt you, and they raise you as their own child. The time comes to find you a husband. She should marry a mouse, says your mother. No, says your father, she should marry a man. So your father brings home a man for you to marry, and your mother has found a very nice mouse. You are not sure what to do.
On the one hand, this human husband seems very nice and very strong. On the other hand, you are a mouse, and this mouse husband seems very nice. But is he strong? Would a mouse be strong enough to take care of you? But wait, maybe there is another option. Maybe there is a husband who would be the strongest of all, stronger than a mouse, stronger than a human. You think about your options. Will you marry the human husband? Or will you marry the mouse husband? Or will you seek the strongest husband of all?
Well, I think I'm probably going to seek the strongest husband of all, even though I another option because I think strength is overrated. But
Well, see, with this is how it goes. All of these options are appealing, right?
to extend the meaning, what most of us mean when we say strong, and I'll pick the bottom one.
Okay, so why don't you read since you made your choice?
You go ask your human parents who would be the strongest husband of all. Your mother says, we worship the sun. He is very strong. Your father agrees the sun might make a good husband. So you begin your journey visit to the sun. Very bad feeling about this. All right, Laura,
Actually, it's not going to be bad the way you think. I can
Okay.
tell what you're thinking. It's not going to be bad like that. So you go visit the sun. Oh, sun, you say, I have heard you are very strong. The sun smiles and says, I am. Will you marry me? You ask. I will, he replies. But first, I have to tell you something. I'm strong, but there is someone who is stronger than I am. The cloud. When the cloud comes out, I disappear. The cloud is stronger than I am. So the sun is strong, but he is not the strongest of all. Will you marry the sun anyway, or journey towards the cloud?
I think I'm committed to my understanding of the word strong, even though reluctant.
Well, now you need to talk with the cloud.
You go visit the cloud. Oh, cloud, you say, I've heard you're very strong. I have even heard that you are stronger than the sun. The cloud smiles and says, I am. So will you marry me, you ask? I will, he replies. But first, I have to tell you something. I'm very strong, but there's someone even stronger than I am. The wind. When the wind blows, I have to go where he tells me. The wind is stronger than I am. So the cloud is very strong, but he is not the strongest of all. Will you marry the cloud anyway? Or, I have to do it, Laura. Journey on.
And I'll say some more later about building all these choices. But exactly, I'm glad you want to go to the wind. So you go visit the wind. Oh, wind, you say, I've heard you're very strong. I've even heard you're stronger than the cloud, who is stronger than the sun. This is part of a chain tail project. We're building the chain. The wind smiles and says, I am very strong. So will you marry me? You ask. I will, he says. But first, I have to tell you something. I'm very, very strong. But there's someone even stronger than I am. The wall. When I run into the wall, I can't go any farther. The wall is stronger than I am. So the wind is very, very strong, but he is not the strongest of all. Will you marry the wind anyway, or journey onwards to the wall?
I kind of want to marry the wind.
You can marry the wind and put an end to all of this, right? I want to marry the wind.
Big fan of walls, so I'm going to.
Okay. You and the wind make your wedding plans, and then you began to plan your honeymoon. Let's go to Italy, you say. I can't, he says. A wall will stop me before I get there. Then let's go to Jamaica. I can't, he says. A wall will stop me before I get there. You realize that this is not going to work out. Perhaps you should marry the mouse that your mother had chosen for you. Or maybe you should go visit the wall after all.
All right, I'll visit the wall. So visit the wall. Oh, wall, you say, I've heard you're very strong. I have even heard that you are stronger than the wind, who is stronger than the cloud, who is stronger than the sun. The wall smiles and says, I am so strong. And will you marry me, you ask? I will, he replies. But you need to know that there's someone even stronger than I am. The mouse. You cannot believe it. You ask the wall to explain. The mouse is much stronger than I am, the wall explains. He gnaws and nibbles and builds tunnels beneath me. Sooner or later, I will fall, and it's all because of that mouse. You never expected this. The mouse is the strongest of all. You're ready to go back home and marry that mouse.
Back home, you find the mouse that your mother had chosen for you. You explain that you want the strongest husband of all. The sun is strong, the cloud is stronger than the sun, the wind is stronger than the cloud, the wall is stronger than the wind. But that mouse is the strongest of all. Will you marry me, mouse? You ask. Gladly, says the mouse. But first, I have to tell you something. Cat is even stronger than I am. Now you're really confused. You know about the cat. The cat is dangerous. But you said you wanted the strongest husband of all. Will you marry the mouse or journey onwards to the cat?
Oh, this is so hard. Oh, All right, I'll journey toward the cat. You go to the cat and explain, I'm looking for a husband. I met the sun and cloud and wind and wall and mouse, each stronger than the last. But now I hear that you are the strongest of them all. Is it true, O cat? It is true, says the cat proudly. I am the strongest of them all, and I will be glad to marry you. Will you marry the cat or return to the mouse?
You decide to marry the cat because he is the strongest after all. You and the cat plan a big wedding. All the cats are going to come, and all the mice too. The big day arrives. You have a big wedding feast. Oh, typo. But when the food runs out, the cats start eating the mice. All the mice, including you. Oh no, that did not end well. Maybe in your next lifetime, things will turn out differently. You're reborn as a mouse, a tiny girl mouse. Your mouse mother takes good care of you. You are growing up, getting bigger and bigger every day. It is time for you to go outside on your own. You scurry along when all of a sudden a hawk swoops down. You scream, and so it goes. Around and around. Then another hawk flies up. He is bigger than the first hawk. Drop that mouse, he screams. You recognize the voice. It's your mouse husband, reborn as a hawk. He really did love you. Afraid of the larger hawk, the first hawk drops you, then both birds fly away. You are left all alone. And then it's back to where we began. So
Wow.
that is all from, like I said, this ancient Indian folktale. And if you scroll down, you can see the Twine screen that goes with it.
Ah,
Well, there are my little cards. And you saw how we had some sort of little dead ends that just, like when you wanted to marry the wind, it sort of backfired and you had to go back and choose either the mouse or the wall. And when you see it laid out here, it's got a kind of dynamic to it, but it takes a long time when you've got your index cards. And I always build Twine games with index cards to figure out exactly how this is going to work. So you can sort of imagine all those little boxes from the Twine screen started out as index cards.
now you're
So,
seeing index cards. I also see arrows here.
right. Twine draws those arrows, which is
Do you,
just great.
do you use arrows in your index card methodology? Anything to indicate where things could hop to potentially, or no?
I just I stack them or layer them because you can see they sort of come in groups, and for the story that I was working with, and this is just such a great way to get a sense of story dynamics, is there's a real movement here, and you can sort of get a sense of that looking at it laid out, and maybe you got a sense of it as we were reading the story. This is a chain tale. It has a lot of repetition in it on purpose. So I don't recall having used pieces of string or ribbon or anything to make the arrows work here. This is from 7 or 8 years ago that I did this mouse story, so I really don't remember. But one thing I was going to say is that whenever you look at someone's Twine, that screenshot is the Twine editing screen. Any Twine story is an HTML file. So whenever you read someone's Twine story, you can then download that HTML file that may involve looking at the source code for a web page and finding the HTML URL in the source code because it's probably embedded like in my web page here.
By
But
that,
once you've downloaded an HTML file, you can then upload it into the Twine space so you can see how anyone's Twine story looks. And how it works behind the scenes.
and just to make sure I understood what you said earlier, I'm looking at Google Sites. This black box part is the part that would have the HTML.
That is literally an HTML file embedded in the Google Sites page. And so that's a tricky thing about doing Twine stories is that you need some kind of web hosting space of your own. So my students had web hosting space that was available to them through Reclaim Hosting. So you upload the HTML file into your web space, and then you just embed that like you would embed iframe any web page into a Google site.
And this that I'm looking at right here, I'm guessing is just an image
Screenshot, exactly. Screenshot of the Twine. I never installed Twine on a computer because I'm a Chromebook user. So I always just use the browser-based version. So that's a screenshot of the browser-based version of the Twine story. And what's cool is that if you ever lose your Twine story or something because the browser, you have to refresh your browser or your computer crashes or whatever, any place where you've saved the HTML file, you just upload it and there it is. It's very portable. It's all in the HTML file.
I had mentioned in the conversation Laura and I had for the main teaching in higher ed episode this time that I had attempted and
Oh,
failed.
there we go. Sure. I can see the logic of that one. It's easy to see just looking at it.
Yeah, because I never really got very far, but just so people know what it looks like, there's a card. This instead of an index card, it's a code, and you can see that I bit off a little bit more than I could chew, but this was the variables that Laura was discussing.
Mhm.
So, and I did get some help and some, what's the opposite of help? From ChatGPT. I kept
Warnings. Yeah.
getting this stuff wrong, but because I have some very elementary understanding of programming languages in general, I knew what a variable was, and so I could understand, oh, it's credibility. So that as somebody took more credible steps in sifting across the different scenarios,
Ah,
could earn some points, and that would be
yep.
collect. They went along, and then I would never start this way if I were starting from scratch again, but there were 3 different scenarios because I wanted to have a more business oriented one, more of a marketing person, and then more of a consumer person.
Mm.
And it just was too much for the first project and everything. But this is what would tell it, it would take that variable. They would choose, I want to be a business person or I want to be a marketer. And then that's the role that they carry with them through the whole story. And then
Mhm.
this is the actual text. A viral article claims 90% of businesses will replace workers with AI next year. I should give Laura an award. What do you?
I love fake percents. There they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you can see how you said that scenario is too complex, but it's really not. Any scenario that you can explain in a simple statement like that will be easy to sustain with the variables. It's a little tedious, but that's different from being hard, and
I work, I mean, I'm going to take your advice, which is to start with index cards, that I need to focus on story first, and then I can focus on playing with the technology and how to make it all work. And instead of trying to both write a series of stories at the same time that I'm trying to learn Twine, that was where I went wrong with.
Twine is also a terrible editing space. So you need to type out all your text before so that you can then just copy and paste into the Twine. If we go back to that Twine game website, I'll show one where I had variables. We won't play it.
Yeah.
But if you go back to the Twine games where we were and then go to the one called Cryptids
Yep.
and scroll on down, I guess I don't have a screenshot of what the
Hmm.
game space look like. But this is one that I built with variables where you encounter different creatures and you don't assume different roles, but this is very similar to what you said. You have magic objects or powers that you've been given at the beginning of the game. So in a sense, that kind of defines who you are, not with a specific label, but you're the character passing through this forest and you're in possession of things that either do or do not help you cope with the creatures that you encounter. So in a way, in terms of the logic, that's very similar to what you were doing, that it adds a layer of variability to it. And that's why they're called variables, right? Is that you let the variables um, shape the story. And the great thing about these variables in Twine, for those of us who learned programming with BASIC back in the day, back in the 70s, when you didn't have to scope your variables or anything, you just declared them and ran with them. That's what Twine is like. It's really for people who do serious programming, it will feel kind of sloppy or even scary. But for people who've just done programming in the simplest possible ways, like messing around with macros on your computer or something like that, or basic programming, Twine variables are very easy because you just declare them and then let them do their variable thing. So
You had mentioned the rhyme maze. Is it a literal maze here, or
It's just that you wanna get out of it. So it's not a visual maze, but the idea is that you're making choices that will eventually lead you out of the maze, and the idea is because they're nursery rhymes, they're very short little bits of text. It's not as ponderous as the ones that have 100-word stories in them. So it is m meant the way I visualize it when I'm playing it is that there are these objects in the maze, so there's a crown or there's bread or there's cake and you're sort of going to that thing. And then eventually you get to the door that leads out of the maze. This was a really fun one to do because nursery rhymes are short. So it gave me the content. And to make this one, all I had to do was go through the nursery rhymes that I picked out to use and then just look for the little objects in them and put my cards out on the table so that there was a path that led out. And there is just one path that leads out, but I had lots of ways that you could circle back around or whatever, but there is just one path that led out. And so that was a physical maze in a sense on my tabletop, but it doesn't feel like a visual maze here. It's just you're making choices based on what's available.
you had mentioned about going to get inspired by other Twine stories, that's a great way to start too. And it occurs to me that I'm going to just quickly look at my bookmarks for my Twine bookmarks to there's a guidebook that I found along the way. Oh, I learned a new word in my experiments. A chapbook. And I know you know what a chapbook is, but could you tell us what a chapbook is? Because when I saw this, I thought I've seen this before, but I couldn't remember. You want to explain what a chapbook?
Well, and the reason you came across that is I think because that's one of the new styles that you can use. For a very long time, the only Twine style was that black background with the white and the blue, and you could go in and alter the HTML yourself if you knew what you were doing, and I certainly didn't. So my early games are all just on that black background, and when they released that chapbook version, that's what you saw with the nursery rhymes. It's so pretty because it's modeled on the idea of chapbooks were what you might call pamphlets. Back in the day, we now have this idea that a book should be like 100, 200, 300 pages. That's what a book is. But of course, books can be any size. There's no reason why a book has to be that big. And so chapbooks were little books. I'm guessing maybe it has to do with the word chapter, but I've never looked at the etymology of that word. It's from Chapman and book. Well, how about that? I had no idea.
So this is coming up just in conversation. I keep seeing references to zines and
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know I've seen that. Actually, I ordered some zines all the way from across the pond, as the expression goes, from Brian Mathers, and they came in the international mail, and it was a very exciting thing. But do you want to describe zines to people? It seemed also like I'm seeing a lot of activism and groundswell there. Yeah.
Oh, zines have a great history as like, tiny magazines, produced very much, in-house. And there's a wonderful workshop that we did for MyFest where we made zines. And so in the show notes, I'll dig up the URL for that YouTube workshop. It was so much fun just that we made paper zines for ourselves. And I have to say too about, and in the YouTube, she talks about the history of zines for activism.
Before you go on, though, I'm cracking up because the whole thing with MyFest, the whole community, one of the many qualities I love about it is you're not supposed to have FOMO, as in a fear of missing out. And I don't even remember seeing this session, but had I seen it and had I not been able to attend, it would have been the biggest FOMO I've ever experienced.
Well, but you can attend it because, there's this thing about how do people ever watch recordings of things? With this one, it's worth watching the recording because she walks you through step by step of how to make your zine. So you won't be doing it with others unless you get someone, maybe your kids want to make zines or something too. It's really fun because you're folding the paper and cutting and stapling and you have to like do it in the right order. And there's a whole tradition too of not exactly zines, but they're kind of zine-ish. These folded books that you can find teachers doing where the idea is that you fold the paper so that the story emerges as you unfold it. They're so much fun. I don't have those in that bibliography yet, but I have some great examples of um, folded book type stories, which is just great. So it's like people think that to make stories cool, you need computers and digital and audio, visual. It's like, no, paper is cool, people. You can do really amazing things once you start folding your paper. And I don't know if you remember those little fortune tellers that we used to make with the folded paper. Paper is cool. So,
Uh, and they still do that, by the way. Our kids are uh 11 and 13 now, and I mean, they know, I think they probably still know how to fold those, but they certainly did it a few years back. It's still happening all these years later.
exactly, because it's amazing. There's no digital substitute for that because you're like doing the flipping thing and you made it yourself. So, and once again, that's another example of a formulaic thing, right? You learn from someone else how to do this. You're not doing it different from them, but the contents you put in your fortune teller, that's what makes it yours. That's what makes it different. Yeah.
Or anything else you want to show people about Twine before we close our time?
Oh, just to say that once again, Twine can be frustrating. It takes a lot of time sometimes to do it, but when you get in the zone and you're working on your Twine, it's really fun. And then when you're done, it is the coolest feeling ever because you made this thing and it's very easy to share with others. So all my students who did Twines, it was frustrating. It took way more time than any of the other project options in my classes, but they were always really happy with what they ended up with.
That
So,
that I was showing earlier, that was attempt to do some sifting scenarios. Even though I didn't finish 3 different scenarios all the way through, I got far enough along that one of the scenarios could, yeah, I could start to earn some points. And I mean, I got it working, and that, even that was just satisfying to do. And before I closed, I was just starting to point out, this is one of the many
right.
guides that I found for, so we've been talking a lot about forks, but we didn't call them forks, but the idea of having different choices. Did you want to walk along the beach or climb the rocky hall? So they teach you how, how do you format the text, just to have bold or
Right.
use simple links. So all of this is available in different help. I saved a bunch of Twine things, lots and lots.
Well, and if people don't have web space of their own or that level of like working with an HTML file and everything, if that's kind of intimidating to you, you can do branching stories with other tools as well, right? I mean, hyperlinks are branching stories, right? So you can get a Google site and just build all the different options as separate pages and have it all be links from one thing to another. And Google Forms is also really good at doing branching things. So you need Twine if you're going to be doing complicated things with variables. But if you really just want to do choose your own adventure, well, the internet, the HTML part of the internet at least, is choose your own adventure. All of it is. You're clicking on links all the time and making choices. So if Twine does frustrate you and you realize that you don't have web space of your own and you just don't want to go to that trouble, play around with Google Forms, play around with Google Sites. You can create all kinds of forks, branching things with choices.
And if that doesn't give you enough options, since you mentioned Google Forms, I have a friend who has made reverse escape rooms. Wait,
Mhm.
virtual escape rooms using Google Forms, and it works nicely. What I wasn't able to get Google Forms to do, I had wanted to. I don't know, Laura, you probably will know what I'm talking about. A lot of times I would love it, as when I was quite younger, to go, read the magazines or whatever. And you would take the little quiz, and, if you answered A on questions 1, 4, and 5, you got 10 points each. And if it was C on question, and it would say, oh, you're this kind of a person, or, oh, this is where you wound up landing, or whatever it was. It would give you all these different um sort of groupings for things. And I could never find a way to get Google Forms to say, okay, that's worth 2. And it just wouldn't do it. But as I was experimenting with Twine, I was realizing, and by the way, the reason that the application for this specifically was that I teach a personal leadership and productivity class. And I thought it would be such a cool, welcoming activity to just have people say, oh, do you have goals? And are they written down anywhere? And do you have a way that you feel comfortable managing your email, or and then they could kind of think through and advance some of the value that they might get out of the class, was kind of my goal here. But after talking to you today, I don't know how cool that would be, versus if I could come up with like a story element to it that would be a relatable story. That might be something even more intriguing to bring them into the class. I have all these ideas brimming in my head.
Well, and think about scorekeeping. I'm involved right now in a project where I'm building a riddle game with someone. It's the first time I've ever built a game. And we were looking at, how would it work in person? How would it work on Zoom? Is it possible to do it as a solitaire game? And one thing I learned from talking to my former student who designs board games is you can have people keep score manually, right? The scorekeeping doesn't have to happen in a digital space. There are all kinds of board games you play and you keep score manually with chips or tokens, and the design of the tokens becomes part of the charm of the game. So you could maybe use a Google form, and all it does is say, you get 3 tokens or you get 1 red and 2 yellows if you answer this way. And then they could do it with colored poker chips. And then at the end, it's like, oh, look, I've got 17 blue poker chips and I've only got 3 yellow chips. And that could correspond to something. I don't know. Just in thought.
Love that. I love that idea. I have dear friends who seem to really appreciate that I like to think through in my imagination lots of possibilities, but who can gently, kindly, while celebrating that trait about me, go, but also let's keep it simple. Take me from my sometimes a likelihood of making something more complicated than it needs to be. Sometimes it's as simple as the best. So yeah.
Yeah. Or smaller is better. My students would plan out these like enormous projects. And it's like, okay, let's do this part and see how it goes. And that part would take them all semester. So, and sometimes every once in a while I had a student who went on to write that novel or whatever it was that they had in mind. But my goal was really just to make sure they had a great experience for the semester and had this thing they could be proud of. Because when you get to the end of a thing, even if it's just a small thing, even if it's just writing a haiku, you feel good because you did that thing.
And I'll close with this and actually let me go back to your like so I can close on it. But you're also really inspiring me to, yes, think small for individual projects. You shared your first project over here. But imagine if I just came up with some real small project and then opened up for those students who would want to create a project that could be shared in a shared space like this would be so fun. I've been very challenged in the best ways possible after reading John Warner's book, More Than Words, How to Think of Writing in an AI.
I'm so glad that book came out. Yes, along with Audrey, John is just the best. He really is.
And then to talk to him, but I'm just so reminded of where I feel like I'm failing in some aspects of my teaching is not enough of either that real or imagined audience. And that if I could really challenge myself a little bit more to be thinking about that across some of the more assignments, I think that would be really helpful. And yet at the same time, I will tell you, and I guess we talked about this more during the actual podcast episode, but just the idea of students, it's really challenging. I want to be gentle with myself in terms of how hard it is to get them to want to talk to each other, to get them to really want to connect with other human beings. This feels harder than it's maybe ever felt, or perhaps felt in at least more than a decade. It's tough. It is tough. Not it's still worth pursuing, but it's hard.
If you can, like I said, give people tasks that really everyone can do, and I know it may sound strange to say that asking people to read and comment on a 500-word writing assignment is too much, but sometimes it really is just too much. Those 100-word stories really saved us during the pandemic. And when I said we wrote a book during the fall 2020 semester, I didn't say to my students, we need to write a book. That was their idea. They were excited about it, so on top of all the regular work we did for the class, we did that book too, but it was so doable because it was made up of lots of small things. And small things are great. And then they pile up and you got a big thing because it's made up of all these small things.
Yeah. Oh, this has been so helpful. Thank you for this first ever behind the scenes. We're going to need to make up a name for it, but thank you so much again.